Guys, today I want to show you how to create a RESTful web service in Spring. So you may ask yourself, what is REST? Now REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And this is basically an architectural style where data and functionality are considered resources and are accessed using this thing called a URI, which stands for Uniform Resource Identifiers. Now, what this means is that in order to access the functionality or the data of a RESTful web service, that data can only be accessed using, at the bare minimum, at least a URL or a URI that you use to reference resources from a RESTful web service. Now, these resources are acted upon by using a set of simple, well-defined operations, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Another thing is that RESTful web services are designed to use a stateless communication protocol, typically HTTP. And I'm sure you guys have seen HTTP before, but what is HTTP? HTTP is, first of all, it stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And it's basically the foundation of communication for the World Wide Web. So if you've typed in an address into a URL, then you've used HTTP in order to do that. And another thing about HTTP is that it defines how messages are formatted and transmitted across the internet. Another thing to note is that HTTP is stateless, which basically means that each command is executed independently. So whenever you send the command through the internet, that particular command does not have any knowledge about any of the previous commands that have been sent before it. So that's why HTTP is stateless. Now, when it comes to RESTful web services, these are the HTTP methods that are used when working with RESTful web services. I've only included a few here. There are a couple more methods, but I just wanted to include these methods because they're somewhat, the most common, and I just wanted to include these methods. But as I said before, there are more. But let's first of all start with this GET. So GET is used to read or retrieve data from a specified resource. So it's basically used for referencing data or requesting some type of data. Alright, now POST is another HTTP method that is used with REST and is basically used to create or insert data of some sort. And basically when you're using POST, you're going to be using a URL in conjunction with some type of JSON or XML. And to go back to GET for a minute, when you're working with GET, you're only going to be using a URL in order to access information. Then we have this method called PUT, which is basically used to just update or replace a resource. And the method PATCH is used to update or modify an existing resource. And then simply the delete HTTP method is pretty straightforward. It's used to delete a resource. So these are the two methods that we're going to be using when we go about implementing this RESTful web service. As I said before, it's going to be a simple RESTful web service that I'm going to walk you through and show you how to develop using Spring Boot. So let's build a RESTful web service in Spring. Empty project, and the first thing that we need to do is set ourselves up a Maven project. So I'm going to right click here, go to new, go to project, and then type in Maven. Go to Maven project, and then here we're just going to have the name of our project, so Spring REST, and then up here in the group ID field we're just going to add our package name, so com study rest. Finished. Alright, so I have our empty project here, and just like in my previous videos, the first thing that we're going to do is go to our pom.xml file. And after that's loaded up, we just want to go down here to our pom.xml so it can actually view the source. After that, we want to add another dependency here, and for this particular application, we're going to be using Spring Boot. So we have to go and look this up online. So this is what we have here, Spring Boot Web Starter. In order to make your way to this page, only thing that you have to do will be to go to mvnrepository.com and type in Spring Boot. And then once you do that, just go to this second link down here, and then go to the latest release, and then you make it here, copy this dependency, go back to Eclipse, and then right click and paste. Alright, so we're pretty much done with our pom.xml file. You can exit this, and what we need to do next is go to this source main Java, open this up, then go to app.java, and go to the top of this application object class and add the annotation Spring, save this, Spring Boot application. Now, after we do that, we want to go to our main method and just simply add Spring application.run, and from here we just go app.class, then args, and that's it. We can just simply run the application now, and you'll see the console is going to show up running this application in Spring Boot. See all this information here. Alright. Now, before we actually start building our RESTful web service, we need to go online and download this application called Postman. So you want to go to Google and type in Postman. And Postman is basically an application that we're going to use to construct different requests quickly. So it's something that allows us to test our web services, our web service endpoints, pretty much. Alright, so you want to go to this first link, and you have to make sure that you have Google Chrome. So you just want to go here, download the app. If you scroll down, some of the things that it includes, this is what the actual application looks like, and that's pretty much it. So you just go here, download Postman. After you've done that, you should get an application that looks something like this. I already have it installed on my computer actually, and that's it. You should have this application. Alright, so we want to go back to Eclipse. We want to go back to Eclipse, and then we want to create a class. So we go up to this package, right click, new class, and name this class controller. Now, inside of this class, we want to go, well, actually on the top of this class, we want to add an annotation called @RESTController. And this @RESTController annotation is basically going to mean that inside this class is going to consist of HTTP methods. So we're going to be calling HTTP methods within this class in order to allow our web service to run. Alright, and that's pretty much how Spring uses this @RESTController. Alright, so what we want to do next is actually create ourselves a method now. So we want to go public string hello world. Alright, then we just want to return hello world. Alright, this is a pretty simple method, right? But we're not just going to be leaving the method like this. We actually want to add an annotation at the top of this method called @requestMapping. @requestMapping, and this @requestMapping is basically an annotation that we would use in order to associate a method with an endpoint. So when you're first running this Spring application, it's going to be running on port 8080. And if I just simply add a slash here, that means that if my application is running and I go to port 8080, I should get a return value of hello world presented in the browser. Now, another thing that we need to add is the method. As I said before in my presentation, right now we're going to just be focusing on the get and the post methods. That's what we're specifically going to be focusing on. So we just want to identify that within this here. Method equals Alright, so we're going to be using a get. A request method, actually. I'll put HTTP there. Alright, so yeah, we're actually going to be using a request method. So, just like I said before, let's remove this unused import. All right, so just like I said before in my presentation, when we're using a get, that is only going to consist of a URL or a link that we're going to be using to retrieve data. So right now, when we run this application is going to be running locally, so we would have to hit port 8080. But just imagine if another application were to access this web service, they would have to have that link or that URL in order to get this information back, this hello world information back. So this is a pretty simple example. So what we're going to do first is actually run this application. Make sure that it's running. And in the console, if you can see down here, we have this thing right here, 8080. This means that this is the port that it's running on. So simply we can go to a browser or we can go into Postman. So we're first of all going to go to a browser and then type in localhost 8080. We're going to press enter. And we should get hello world. As you can see right here, we're getting hello world back. And we can also do this in Postman. This is how you go about doing it. You go to Postman. You have to actually choose your HTTP method that you're using, and in this case we're using get. From there, localhost 8080, we just press send, and then we get this return, hello world, exactly what we got in our browser. Okay. Now, along with this get method that we do have the ability to also pass in parameters into a URL. Now, these parameters that we pass in are actually going to go within this method parameter actually. So if you want to pass parameters to a URL, this is how it would look. So if you wanted to pass in a parameter, we'll go something like this. We'll go question mark and then the name of the parameter and then equals and then whatever the value is of that parameter. So that's how we will pass in parameters to a URL. Alright, so that's how we'll go about doing that. So in order to allow parameters to be added into this message here, what we're going to do is something like this. So we're going to go up here and add this annotation, request param, which you can see right here. And then in this request param, what we want is to add to two attributes. Value equals name, and then comma default value equals let's just say world. Let's do this. World. And then string name. Alright, so what we're gonna do is actually remove this world. So to explain this, what I'm doing here is I'm allowing a parameter to be passed into this endpoint here. So we already know that the endpoint is 8080. Okay, so $80.80. And now with this parameter, we have the ability to add in a parameter which will go name equals and then we can say something like max. And then from there, the parameter of the name is going to be passed in, and we're going to do something like this. So as you can see here, we have this at request param, and then we want to take in the value of the name. But if the user does not enter in a name, then we're going to have a default value of world right here. So it's going to automatically populate no matter what. So if a user enters in a name, it's going to take in hello and then the name. Or if the user does not enter in a name, we're going to get back world. Alright, so that's how that works. So now, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to run this application. Until this loads up. And now, we're going to go back to our browser, and then we're going to go name equals, and then we're just going to, let's go Mike. Hello Mike. So as you can see, we have hello Mike right here. Now if we remove Mike, localhost 8080, this is what we get, hello world. Exactly what we were expecting. So that's how you put together a RESTful web service by using the request.get method. And now really quickly, I'm just going to show you how to put together a RESTful web service by using POST. Alright, so we want to have the basic setup just like we did before at request mapping. And then from here, we want to go value equals slash method equals request. Method equals I guess you would have to have an actual method first. Public string hello world 2. Okay, and then from here we're just going to do this. Hello. Okay. Request method dot post, and now we're going to be using our post request. Now, as I said before in my presentation, the post request is going to consist of URL as well as a body, either in JSON, XML, or it can be pretty much within any format. We're pretty much just going to be using a text format for this. So what we're going to be doing here is, since we're using this post, we're going to do something like this. We're going to be using a request body. So instead of the parameters which are going to be passed into the URL, we have the ability to add a response, well, request body actually. So I'm going to go into this parameter and go request body, and then something like this, request body, and string name. Alright, and then we just do the same thing here, name. Alright, so to explain this a little bit, as I said before, when we're working with posts, it usually consists of the URL as well as the body that you would have to enter in order to get your appropriate response. I said it can be in XML or JSON, but right now we're just simply going to be using text. So this is how it's going to look. We have a hello world 2. It's mapped to localhost 8080, but in order to activate this post request, we're going to have to use Postman in order to do that. Alright, so before we were using parameters, now we're going to be using this request body as a parameter. And we're going to test this out right now. Stop that. We want to run this. It loads up all the way. Alright, so we want to go to Postman. And then localhost 8080. And then we want to select post. And then right here it's going to open up this body. Now we can enter in a value. We can say max. Right? So we're using the post request, we're passing in this URL, localhost 8080, and from here we're passing in a request body. So I'm entering in information within this request body, which is located right here. So I go to send, and I get hello max that you can see down here as the response. And that's pretty much how you build a simple web service using Spring Boot. Okay, so if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video if you've learned something here. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and see you in the next one.